I'm Kevin Rinke, and I'd like to welcome you to Beyond the Echo. I ran for governor in Michigan. After losing that election, my desire to look at issues that are important to the state or the country grew. There is so much static. There are so many opinions. Our news stations have gotten to the point where we don't know what news is anymore. Where do you go to get real facts? This is about real perspective for you. Beyond the Echo will cut through all the smoke, all the opinions. It's not about Republicans. It's not about Democrats. It's about the issues and what are real. Welcome to our 17th episode of Beyond the Echo. And I am really excited tonight. We have Dr. Sam Fawaz. And Sam is a national figure in the Arab community, in the Middle Eastern community here in Michigan and across our country. And what makes Sam so unique is that he believes in conservatism in the Republican Party. And I would like, Sam, tonight to learn from you, because the Middle Eastern community brought Michigan to Donald Trump, and you were an integral part of that. And I want to thank you for that, because while you were out working, I was out working. And I think we've got a good man, and America's future is brighter because of the work you did and Donald Trump. And I'd just like to talk to you, starting with, about the community, which the epicenter seems to be around Detroit. There's roughly 400,000 Arab Americans that live in the area. Is that correct?
Yeah, so about estimates range between 400,000 to 600,000. I don't know exactly what the real number is, but 400,000 to 600,000 of people of Middle Eastern descent: Arab Americans, Chaldean Americans, Assyrian Americans, Armenian Americans. So there's a lot of people in Metro Detroit that trace their roots back to the Middle East.
So from a learning perspective for me, because I generalize when I say the Arab American community, is it more appropriate to say the Middle Eastern?
I think to be more inclusive and representative of what Michigan or the greater country has in terms of people from that region, Middle Eastern American tends to be more correct as a label, and there's different factions. There's Arabs, there's, like I said, Chaldeans, Assyrians, Armenians, so on and so forth. So to the outsider, normally they're all lumped in under Arab American, but each one has their roots, has their ethnic background, their heritage, their traditions, and everybody's proud of it. So, I try in this day and age to be culturally sensitive to people and just making sure that we identify them with the right terminology.
Well, I think it's important for all of us to consider that, not being a member of that community, I want to interact correctly. And it's a complex group of people, from a religious perspective, from a tribal perspective, from a historical perspective. And I think part of the problem is part of the suspicion that exists within the community, if there is a suspicion, is that people don't understand it. And that's why I'm so excited to see and to hear and to learn about what you're doing. So why don't we start off with your Lebanese descent?
Correct.
And tell us about your history, your family, how you ended up in Michigan. We're going to start there, and we're going to walk through the whole genre of the different groups. And for our viewers, the goal is to have them understand just how significant this group of people is to the future of Michigan and to the success of Donald Trump.
Well, first and foremost, Kevin, thank you for being here tonight and having me on the show. I think this is a conversation that has needed to happen for a long time, and it's really, really noble of you to want to reach out and learn about our background, our culture, our story, if you will, as Arab and Middle Eastern Americans in the state of Michigan and the country at large, because I think understanding and learning about others is how we grow to get to know each other better, is how we respect each other more, and it's how we make our state and our country better in general. It's just people learning about each other and squashing stereotypes, so on and so forth. Because I'm a firm believer that as Americans, we all have more in common, regardless of our background, than differences. And I think historically people have operated in their own silos, not really interacting, reaching out. And it's just only a matter of time when people start to converse and to talk to each other is when they realize, my God, we have so much in common, so many similarities. And there's been forces and entities that have kept us divided and not looking at each other in a positive light. So having said that, I was born and raised in Lebanon, in a small little country in the Middle East on the Mediterranean. My father was an officer in the Lebanese army. He instilled in me the values of loving your nation, country first, being a hard worker, being ambitious, being driven, and education was paramount, as it usually is the case in most families of Middle Eastern background. The instilling the values of faith, family, and education is very big in our community. So as I grew up, I watched my father, who was my hero in life, dressed in military uniform, being saluted to by soldiers and other officers. He was a very respected man in his community, abroad and even over here when he came and he retired. So as I grew up, I watched America with I guess you could say with admiration, because it's America. And when you're living abroad and you hear about America, it's everybody dreams of coming to America because that's the land of opportunity, the land where dreams come true. And when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, Michael Jordan was playing basketball. Michael Jackson was singing. And the culture that was, outsourced from America to the world was something that we looked up to. I bought my first Jordans, while living in Lebanon. And so when I was going
What year
through,
did you come, Sam?
I came in 1993.
In 1993.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's so compelling to me that as someone outside of America, you look at our country as the land of opportunity, the land of freedom, and maybe I'm paraphrasing, the land of what is good and right and the ability to make the world a better place. And so many Americans that are already here seem to miss out on that. And it's really compelling for me, and it builds my faith in the value of the immigrants that come to America, that assimilate to America, to the strength that they can bring to what has helped keep our constitutional republic really the most powerful and the greatest country in the history of the world. And I'm sorry to interrupt you because I go back to what you were saying, but God, it's great that you see that.
So I've lived here now over 30 years, and I always say it's unfortunate, but there's a lot of native born Americans, let's say multiple generations, that often take for granted what this country offers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad to see that, because there are people till this moment, as you and I are talking right now, that will give up anything in life to come here and have a chance at the opportunity that so many Americans take for granted nowadays, So, but to go back to, my dad told me in high school, would you like to go to the university in Lebanon, where a lot of people go to universities over there because education, again, is paramount and is highly valued, but graduate with no real job opportunities? Or would you rather go to the United States, where I had aunts and uncles who had been here for decades, had come here for the opportunities at Ford Motor, GM, and Chrysler in the Metro Detroit area.
Was that the draw to Metro Detroit?
Yeah.
The automotive industry.
It was the automotive blue collar worker, the opportunities that people heard about. and they said, here's your opportunity to work and make a good living and live the dream, for lack of a better way of saying it. So when I was given those options as a teenager, I'm being told you can go to the place where Michael Jordan's playing basketball and Michael Jackson's singing, or you can stay in a place where it's a beautiful country. I liken Lebanon in its topography and its landmass and makeup to California. It's got beaches, but it's got mountains. You can go skiing during the morning, come down to the beach, swim in the evening on the same day sometimes.
It's incredible. I did not know that.
It's a beautiful country, but just like, I hate to say it, just like California, it's run poorly. So you can look at something beautiful, but living in it, and inflation and the policies and things like that, opportunity is very scarce. So I chose to come to the United States. I told my dad I'd rather go to the United States, and I came here and I started attending undergrad here.
So you're Lebanese. Let's talk about the values and the culture of the Lebanese people. And does that resonate more in Lebanon today, or does it actually resonate more in America today? When you look at that melding of what makes you guys such great attributes to our state and to our country.
So I think if you sat with 100 Lebanese people, most of them will agree on a lot of things, but some will have the various opinions about what makes people proud to be Lebanese in particular. And I think as someone of Lebanese origin, we pride ourselves on being ambitious. So if you go around the world, you'll find a lot of people of Lebanese heritage that have excelled and are top of their field in various industries.
Mm-hmm.
Michael DeBakey in the field of medicine is renowned as a heart surgeon before he passed away. There are ample examples in the United States, in France, in Latin America, and Brazil of people of Lebanese heritage that have done very well for themselves in their respective countries. That there's actually more Lebanese people around the world than inside Lebanon. The last figures I heard was around 20 million in diaspora, as opposed to 4, 5, 6 million in Lebanon. So it tells you that there's a lot of people that wanted to seek opportunity. We're family oriented, faith driven, whether that's the Muslim faith, the Christian faith. We are.
Does Lebanon recognize multiple faiths?
Oh, absolutely. It's. I think I may be mistaken, but I think it may be the country with the highest percentage of the population that's Christian, as opposed to most of the Arab nations around the Middle East. So there's about 35% of the population is Christian in Lebanon.
Christian.
Yeah.
And is the form of Christianity that they follow, is that similar to the Chaldean Christianity? Or is there a variance to that?
There's similarities and variants depending on the denomination of the faith, right? So it's primarily Maronite and Orthodox in Lebanon. And Maronite is a subsect of Catholicism, as I understand it. I'm not an expert in the faiths, but I think it's practiced. It's traced back because we got to remember. I always joke around. I'm like, Jesus Christ was born in that region. Mm-hmm. He wasn't born in Georgia, right? So he was born in the Middle East. So the people of the Christian faith in that region are the descendants, technically, of the first Christians of the world, right? So they're very devout about the faith. They're very proud of the faith. They're obviously there's been turmoil in the Middle East for a long time, and populations of Christians have dwindled in some countries. But Lebanon prides itself. I mean, as a matter of fact, when I was in Lebanon, I was enrolled in my K through 12 school was a private Catholic school, because the level of education and the nuns, the way they taught, I used to get hit a lot, but that's a different story. But the
nuns whacked me too.
I admired the way they taught us, the the way they stress proper behavior. You know, it wasn't just about education. I mean, if I compare and contrast right now, some of the way K through 12 is conducted here to the way that I was raised and the way I went to school. My God, the level of discipline over there, what's instilled in you, aside from education, math, science, literature, just the way you treat people, the respect for elders, so on and so forth. Once you instill that in a child early on, it carries with them for life and it makes them a better adult.
See, I think that's what America is missing in some of our groups. And you spoke to it earlier that people take it for granted. Well, when you take things for granted, the level of respect goes down, the level of tolerance goes down, the level of curiosity goes down. And there's a unintentional arrogance that doesn't serve us well. And I think that it's really interesting that the Middle Eastern community has the values that I grew up with.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up Catholic, so Christian, but it was faith, family, community. It was about working hard and being successful and then giving back to that community. Not just giving back to people you knew, giving back to the community so everybody could move forward. And that's what I like about Michigan. With all of our diversity, we've got really strong belief and value systems. Don't understand all the cultural things. And that's why I think tonight is going to be such an interesting conversation to learn. But boy, if we can somehow figure out how to bring these groups together, and it's harder for me to do that than it is for someone like you. So tell us a little bit, if you would, about what you're doing to actually do what I was just talking about, and the value of these groups coming together.
Yeah. So I wasn't involved in politics for the first couple of decades of my life here. I focused mainly on my education, on my career, my family. I had bumps along the road and aspects of my personal life, but I didn't really pay much attention, to be honest with you, to politics. And when I started to pay attention to American politics, I was more or less sold on a political party that we call the Democratic Party, because that's what most people around me followed. You know, it's you're in that chamber. Everybody's around you talking the same things. You look at people older than you that have been at it for a long time, and you don't question whether or not they're guided by the right things. And I just followed. I followed people. I supported people, so on and so forth. And after doing it for a while, I had an awakening at some point, somewhere around 2016. That was during the first campaign for Donald Trump. And believe it or not, I was not a fan of his at all. I didn't like the way he carried himself. I didn't like the way he spoke. I didn't like his mannerisms. I didn't think he was presidential. But I also knew that I didn't like Hillary Clinton. I had watched her over the years. I had watched what she did domestically. I had watched what she pushed on the American people. And I had watched closely, as someone of Middle Eastern descent who still has plenty of family over in the region. I have seen what her and the Obama administration had done to that region after they portrayed themselves to be the ones who care about all types of people, care about immigrant communities, care about peace and prosperity. I had seen everything they had done. And my father, God rest his soul, who was in the Lebanese military, after he retired, he moved to the United States and became a small business owner. You know, he was head of the Lebanese intelligence agency in Lebanon. So the man knew politics very well.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not fond of any politicians because he saw all of them in the exact same light. As a military man, he stayed neutral and loyal to the country. And he didn't like what politicians on both sides of the aisle, right or left of there. But we'd sit down and we'd talk. And he was my best friend. You know, we talk about politics all the time. We talk about international politics, domestic politics. And when it came to the 2016 election, I told him, who should I vote for? Who do you think? He's like, neither one of them are good, you know? It's like, they're all politicians, you know? So I didn't end up voting for either one. But I was seeing something happening, which was the following. I had seen that the Democratic Party had monopolized, for lack of a better word, the Middle Eastern community, primarily the Arab American community of Michigan. They had gone into it um, and connected with a lot of people and supported individuals from the community and appointed individuals from the community. And the Republican Party was absent. Now, having said that, I started to pay attention as to after their support, after their commitment to the community, after, and here's the key word that I always talk about, respect of people, respecting people, treating them with dignity, treating them the way you want to be treated, not allowing people to stereotype an entire community. There's always bad apples in any community, in any ethnic group, any race, any religion. But they were very politically correct and very savvy in the way they did things with the Arab American community.
See, I think the Democrats outworked Republicans. And under Donald Trump, what's changed is the Republican Party has actually moved to the party of the people.
I see that.
And they want to listen like we haven't listened previously.
100%.
They want to deliver. And like you, I didn't always agree with how Donald Trump presented himself or how he said things. And I had worked previously for President Gerald Ford, and he was the consummate gentleman. And so that was my filter. Gerald Ford, whether you liked him or not, was always a gentleman. He believed in dialogue and conversation, and he loved America, and he loved Michigan. Ronald Reagan was the next guy to come along that loved America and was a gentleman and represented the values and the beliefs, and the country responded to it. Donald Trump, as rough as he is around the edges, you'd be nuts to say the man doesn't love America.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and the people who want to criticize him for how he loves America, you know, that's what's unproductive. Under Donald Trump, Republicans have started to work again, have started to reconnect, have started to learn. And in Michigan, it's interesting because Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and millennials are going to be like 58% of the electorate in 2026. And that's who Republicans need to reach out to.
Absolutely.
Talk about the characteristics and the values that you've espoused might focus in today's world more on older people of Middle Eastern descent. How are the young Middle Eastern, Arab, Chaldean, Lebanese kids figuring things out? It's close community, but they're being exposed to the same public schools that are liberal, that aren't proud of America. How are they filtering through with that?
I think we're at a crossroads from what I see, you know, and as you said, you know, as you get older, naturally you become more conservative in the way you think and the way in your beliefs and your values. This younger generation, I think it comes back to not just the level of education or the type of education that they're getting. I think it comes back to people wanting to feel respected for who they are and what they believe in. And there's this misconception amongst this entire new generation that Republicans or conservatives are discriminatory, are hateful, are spiteful, are closed-minded, are homophobic, are xenophobic. This is stuff that starts to get pumped into their minds from the time they're in K through 12 education, and it just gets amplified for some reason on college campuses. So these young people, a lot of them come from conservative households, in the I know, and when I'm talking about the Middle Eastern community. They come out of conservative households where mom and dad have instilled values in them that are more along conservative values. Faith, they want them to be big on faith, regardless of whether it's the Muslim faith or the Christian faith. They want them to respect their elders. They want them to believe in family, traditional family values, so on and so forth. And then these kids go out to school for 8 hours a day, where most of the time, historically, parents are not really aware what's happening outside the academic domain. So they can see their grades, but they don't know the conversations taking place between them and their friends, between them perhaps sometimes and teachers nowadays. So they're completely ambivalent to it. And then they go off to college. And then that's a whole other arena now that's changed in the last couple of decades and has shocked so many Americans, not just Middle Eastern Americans. And then they come back. They come back from college after their studies, whether they come back as doctors, they come back as lawyers, they come back as engineers, as pharmacists, and they look at their parents and they're like, my parents are primitive in the way they think. They're archaic. They're backwards. They're discriminatory. And then parents and this is a phenomenon that I noticed, parents are stuck between trying to maintain a good relationship with their adult children now, or losing that relationship because the parents want to stick to their beliefs. So it's either they don't talk about subject matters, or if they do, they have to walk it very carefully as to not offend their children and lose their ability to be around their kids and their grandkids for the rest of their life.
How do we let those kids know? And by the way, it's not just Middle Eastern kids.
It's everybody.
It's across the spectrum. How do we let those kids know that what they have to say is valuable, that what they think deserves discussion, and that we're not archaic? I'm going through the same thing. I've got 3 children, and it's fascinating. My oldest daughter's 31, my son's 27, and my baby is 21 and going to be 22. And there's a separation. And because we're parents, there's no book on parenting, really. You rely on what your parents taught you to a degree. And my mom and I felt like cats and dogs. But in her older years, I came back and I was really grateful for the things she taught me to respect, the things she forced me to learn and experience. And I hope I've shared that same structure with my children. It's natural that we want to deviate, but what can we do? What is your community doing to keep those kids in the fold with their core values of faith, family, community?
So I think a lot of people are going back to the basics. And one of the most basic things right now that I'm noticing is people are going back to faith first and foremost, whether it's in the mosques or whether it's in the church in our Middle Eastern community. I'm noticing there's a revival of faith because you draw your morality from faith. You go and you listen. As long as you're listening to individuals, preachers, whether it's the imam at the mosque or it's the priest at the church, as long as they understand their audience, they cannot speak to them like you would speak to a 70 or 80-year-old person attending a congregation. You got to speak to them where they are, and you got to entice them to get closer to their faith by not being judgmental per se, not scaring them about, if you don't do this and you don't do this, you're going to burn in hell and you're going to have eternal damnation. You got to make faith appeal to them again.
We called it Catholic guilt.
Yes.
And it didn't work on me. I pushed back really hard on that.
Yeah.
But I think that you're right, that there's got to be a place where everybody could go and just talk and be accepted and be listened to. Is religion, and I'm using that term generically, growing within your community? Is it stabilizing or is it decreasing? Because in America,
It's on the decline.
it's on the decline.
Yeah.
And with that decline, morals, values, and faith are suffering. And correspondingly, our country
Yeah.
suffers.
Yeah, and I think to answer your question, I don't have a feel of which direction faith engagement is in our community, but if I had to guess, I would say it's also reflective of the greater country at large. It's on the decline from generation to generation. Um, it's on the decline because one, that's the trend the country is on, but number two is because do you know two parent households are also have been on the decline for a
Mhm.
long time.
Yep.
So it's multifactorial in terms of getting all this younger generation back on track, in my opinion. It's one is faith, one is putting more of an emphasis on a two parent household as opposed to glorifying single parent households, which was done to a certain degree in this. This is something that raised my eyebrows. I mean, I'm somebody who in my first marriage, unfortunately, did not work out. And I was a single parent for a short period of time. And fortunately for me, I was in a profession where I could make a decent income
Mhm.
to support myself. But it was an eye opener for me to say millions and millions of Americans of all backgrounds end up divorced in this country for one reason or another. And they have to raise children as single parents, whether it's their fathers or their mothers, and it's beyond difficult just to survive, let alone pay attention to all the things that you need to instill in your biggest investment in life, which is your child, because
Yep.
they're the future of the generation. So I said it's no wonder morals, values, criminal behavior, drug use, depression, anxiety, suicide attempts, all on the rise, is because absence of faith, broken homes, and the list goes on. So it's got to be a multi-pronged approach to turn the ship around. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
Yeah. I think that even when you don't like what your parents are saying or doing with you, in the back of your mind, there's a tolerance and there's an understanding and there's value to tough love and there's value to parenting. This concept of parents needing to be friends with their kids is foreign to me. And I am friendly with my kids, but you know what? I'm their dad and their mother's their mother. And our house, our rules, want to listen, want to learn, but we get to decide versus them telling us we have to change. And there's value in that.
Absolutely.
There's value in that. You know,
Absolutely.
it's an education. The kids that don't get that opportunity, it's really hard to quantify the damage that's been done. And, you know, really that push started, I think, in the 70s as in America. And America was the only place in the world that was focused on two income families. The only place in the world with the promise of it will make everything better. And we replaced parenting and family interaction and community interaction with cable TV and cell phones and,
Social media.
you know, dumping our kids off with people at daycare centers. And I don't know, I'm really glad that I didn't have to live through that. Now, I wasn't always happy that my mom watched everything I did, but, you know, I learned how to cook. I learned how to sew. I saw how hard my mom worked to keep our home up and the respect that she had for what we had, not what she wanted to have. And we've changed as a country. And I think getting back to
The basics.
the basics is critical. And I think that resonates really with everyone.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you, by getting away from the basics and not paying attention to the most important people in your life, which is your children, you've somewhat relinquished the responsibility and outsourced it to individuals that would be happy and have been happy to come in and fill that space. And a lot of those individuals are not doing good by people's children, and they're manipulating people's children, and they're putting them on things into their mind that harms them in the long run. So it's up to the parents to focus on their children and be highly engaged and involved in their children's lives. And that was one of the biggest things. We always say it takes a village to raise a child. That is and has been the foundation of the Middle Eastern community. Is you think you just have a mom and a dad, but your aunt and your uncle and your grandfather and everybody knows exactly what you're doing and where you're going in life. And we've gone away from that.
I completely agree. I just hate the term "it takes a village" because Hillary Clinton tried to swipe that. And she is such a hypocrite when it comes to the concept of what it takes a village means. Sam, if you were to make a list, I'm a goals guy. And I have, what steps do I need to take to achieve whatever this goal is? What would your list be for the Middle Eastern community, for the Arab community, the Chaldean community, the various groups? What's your list of priorities to make sure that Michigan moves forward, in that Michigan and your people and the people of the state come together to benefit mutually from what your community brings to it? What would that list look like for Republicans?
Or Republicans?
Yeah.
I would think the first and foremost, I think we need almost like an awakening of people understanding that there's been a lot of stereotypes put out for a long time about Middle Eastern people in the United States and Republicans in the United States. The Democratic Party has done a wonderful job with their mouthpieces called the media to paint Republicans in a bad light in general, and have done an equally bad or good job.
Yeah, that's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it a good or a bad job?
Painting Middle Easterners as non-patriotic people, as have tendencies for violence, all of them, as America-hating individuals, as most of them are welfare dependent. So just painting both sides in a negative light to each other. So they've created a division, like this crater in between both entities, and there's been no communication for a long time. I think the first thing that has to happen is we need to have conversations like this. We need to have people talk to people that normally they don't see or interact with, so they can understand that we have so much in common as Republicans and people of Middle Eastern descent. There may be some small differences here and there, but the commonalities are way greater between people of Middle Eastern heritage and the Republican platform than people of Middle Eastern heritage and the Democrat platform.
It appears to me that religion is more important to Republicans. And with that comes faith, morality, and a whole litany of values that I think have helped keep our country strong. And I'm not saying that people on the Democratic Party are atheists I'm not making a overbearing statement towards those people. I don't mean to say that, but it seems to me that the value of religion and how those values, when they are carried from our churches or our meeting places into our businesses, even into our politics. Because it's naive when people say a separation between church and state. When we established our political structure, the church was involved. And I think that people often misinterpret that. You bring the values that you learn through your church in being a good citizen. And that's where the line's drawn. It doesn't mean that, religion isn't important to our political future, because it is. Otherwise, it's chaos.
100%.
The rule of order and respect, I think, stems from religion. People just don't get it through osmosis.
Correct.
You have to learn it. You have to be taught it. You have to see the value of it. And you get that with your family. You get that from your imam. You get it from your sheikh. You get it from your pastor. You get it from your preacher. You get it from your priest. I agree. It's interesting. How do the different groups, and we often focus on Dearborn, and I've been guilty of that, by the way. So when I think of the Middle Eastern community, I say Dearborn generically, but there's Dearborn, or there are Middle Eastern groups in Grand Rapids. There's Middle Eastern groups in Wayne County. There's Middle Eastern groups in Grosse Pointe. And is that offensive to the overall community when we kind of focus and just throw it out there and say Dearborn? That's the place.
So I think most people, when they think of little Arab America in the United States, and in particular in Michigan, think of Dearborn, because that's the highest concentration of Arab Americans living in a certain area in the state of Michigan. So it's created a name for itself. It's created a brand. I have many family members that live in Dearborn. I used to live in Dearborn. And if you go down to Dearborn and you drive through Dearborn, you will feel like you're in a little Middle East, a little Arab country, because there's so many shops and stores with Arabic writing. Mm-hmm. And you get the flavor, just like if you would go to little Italy, little China, and different parts of the country. So it gives you that feeling of being in the Middle East, having that experience. It's a beautiful experience, in my humble opinion. But there are large swaths of Arab Americans and non-Arab Americans from the Middle East living all over Metro Detroit. So there's groups living in Bloomfield. There's groups living in Troy. There's groups living in Sterling Heights. There's groups living in Grosse Pointe and Hamtramck, and so on and so forth. So I think everybody has their pride. Everybody wants to be, it's like a sports team, you want to know, you're acknowledged that it's not just the people of Dearborn that represent Arab Americans. There's other groups all around Metro Detroit and even outside of Michigan. There's, pockets. I saw a statistic that, and this may be right or wrong, we can look it up, but I saw a statistic that the state of California boasts the largest Arab American population, not Michigan. So
I'm not buying it.
Yeah. So California as a whole, but in the concentration wise, it is definitely, in Michigan, in Dearborn, in Metro Detroit, and specifically in Wayne County, right? So that's how they look at it.
Is we try and learn about each other. And I've lived here my whole life. My wife is from Dearborn, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And as we try and learn from each other, would you describe that Arab community, the Middle Eastern community, is open to allowing people like me to come into it, to learn, to sit, to talk, to participate?
So I think this, and I've had people on social media ask me this question one time. And in all honesty, it puts a smile on my face, and it blows my mind at the same time, because I wasn't born and raised here, obviously, but I always wonder where the perception, I put myself in other people's shoes. That's how I learn. Where the perception of not being allowed, maybe one person asked me, would I be allowed to go to Dearborn with a MAGA hat on one time? And now, I know him very well. And I thought to myself, it raised my eyebrow, and I'm like, what do people think will happen? Like, will you get I guess because of modern society, how intolerant some groups are and some people are nowadays, I can see that. But if anything, I can tell you, and I'll preface it by speaking like a lawyer and saying there's always an exception to each case.
Of course, yeah.
But I would tell you 99.99% of Arab Americans or Chaldean Americans or any Middle Eastern American, Muslim or Christian, you tell them, I want to learn more about your community. They will open the door for you. They'll sit you down. You'll want to run out because you don't want to hear anymore. Because that's how much, when you're misunderstood for so long and you've been painted, and I always drew the contrast in social media in the last few years to conservatives. I always tell them the same news channels that smeared and stereotyped our people for decades, long before Fox News. We're talking about CNN. We're talking about ABC,
Sure.
NBC, CBS, the ones that painted all our people collectively as barbarians, terrorists. They'll go to the Middle East or they'll go to Dearborn and they'll find the one person that has extremist ideology with broken English, and they'll interview them and they'll plaster it all over their news outlets, and they will portray all of us. And then you're sitting there and thinking, WTF, right? It just happened for the last 8 years to conservatives. They'll find anybody that will say anything that's remotely extreme, and they will say, these are your Republicans, these are your conservatives, these are the Trumpsters, these are this. So I'm like, finally, people are understanding how we're all being played off each other.
Well, I think that the ability to have conversations is critical.
Absolutely.
And the press has done a wonderful job of dividing.
100%.
Has done a great job of creating different classes, or the perception of different classes, because I still believe that in America, everybody is equal, as far as equal can be. Is it perfect? No, we're going to find exceptions. But if you work hard, if you participate and are active, you have the chance to better yourself.
Absolutely.
And so I dated a Lebanese gal for many, many years.
There you go. He's half Lebanese.
Beautiful. Beautiful, by the way. Blonde hair, blue-eyed Lebanese gal.
Yeah, my mom is blonde-haired and blue-eyed.
You know, I until I met her, I didn't even know that you could be Lebanese and have blonde hair and blue eyes.
Oh, yeah. My brother looks like him. If you saw my brother Denny, he's blonde-haired and blue-eyed.
God, well, that's okay, but looking like Tony, I mean, whew, man, poor guy. It's like someone who says they look like me.
Yeah.
Square head and big ears. I mean, you aren't lucky, right?
Yeah.
You aren't lucky at all. So, Sam, I want you and I want to go to a coffee shop. I want to sit down in the middle of Dearborn. And I think part of what's intimidating for me is, like, there are sections of town where everything is in Arabic.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest with you, that intimidates me. I don't know if it says, hookah lounge. I don't know if it says grocery store. Yeah. I don't know if it says place of worship.
Yeah.
So I need somebody to take me down into that community. And I want to sit and watch. I mean, the food is great. The spirit of the people is fabulous.
I'd be happy to do that for you, Kevin, or anyone else. I brought Garrett Soldano, and he tells you about the experience. Garrett from the west side of the state. Yeah. I think it all boils down to comfort level, and whether we admit it or not. Just like, I'll give you an example. I lived in Dearborn for a short period of time, and I moved out to Northville. Mm-hmm. All my family and friends were like, "You're moving where? Do you know, like, it's all mainly conservatives and Republicans there?" Things like that. Perception was, I'm going to get lynched in Northville.
Yeah, people don't bite, right?
Because that's what's been put in their echo chamber by people all around them and what's been fed to them all along. And we're talking like 2 decades ago. same thing. If you're living in the west side of the state, north side of the state, you're not conversing, befriending, going to school, and interacting with many people of Middle Eastern descent in the Northern Peninsula, in Owasso, and so on and so forth. But the more you mix with people, the more you get angry at mainstream media. Because you're like, those SOBs have brainwashed that crap out of me for so long. I can't believe I used to think like this.
Yep.
Now, you'll always run into people wherever you go in all parts of the country, parts of the world, with strong convictions and strong ideology and extremist, ways of thinking. But if I took you to Dearborn, my fear is every other day, Kevin's like, can we go to Dearborn again? Because you're going to enjoy it so much. The level of hospitality. One thing,
I believe that.
Every group likes to pride themselves on things and they're known for things.
Yep.
I think stereotypes stem from something. And I think in the Middle Eastern culture, hospitality, friendliness, and food, you can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong. Walking into somebody's house, walking into a restaurant, you're gonna look around. You're gonna see a lot of diversity, a lot of people looking like you and looking different. People think like Dearborn right now is like 100% Arab. What people don't know is it's still 50% Irish, German, Polish ancestry. Ford Motor headquarters are still in Dearborn. The west side of Dearborn is primarily still Caucasian. If you go down there, you think I challenge people to go to downtown Birmingham and then walk through West Dearborn. They're gonna come back and think, wow, And the difference is, here's the caveat: Middle Easterners love to enjoy life, contrary to what social media, mainstream media likes to paint what's in the Middle East. Over here, we like to party, we like to go out, we like to hang out, we like to socialize because life's short. What is there? You make all the money in the world and you live alone, So in Birmingham, in downtown Plymouth, and downtown Northville, in the areas where I live right now, by 8, 9 p.m., everything is shut down. Maybe one bar, the Post Bar, is open. If I take you to Dearborn when it's not 20 degrees out and it's like 70 degrees and it's a Friday, Saturday night, people are hanging out till 2 a.m. at the establishments.
I love it.
There's life. It's what you enjoy. It's you socialize and you interact with people. And I think it's such a sad story what this media concept has done. That's why I'm happy they're dying. I'm happy legacy media has been called out, not just by Trump, but by everybody now. They've seen that their entire business model has been to divide people.
To manipulate. Yeah. I got a question for you. Have you ever had a Miller's Bar hamburger in Dearborn?
I have not, but I heard it's like rated one of the top burger places in the country. And when presidential candidates come here, they go to Miller's Bar.
They go to Miller's Bar.
Yeah, and
it's a great spot.
Yeah.
When my wife and I were dating, every time we argued, we made up at Miller's.
Oh, wow.
We would go and we would have like a double cheeseburger and a long neck Budweiser and some fries or onion rings. And all was good. Always good.
I'm going to have to try it.
I think you should.
My wife actually asked me, should I make them dinner before you guys got here? And I'm like, I honestly don't know if they'll be hungry or not, because again, that's our people. That's what we pride on. Every culture has something they pride themselves on. One of the things is like, it's almost I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, to let people come in and out of your house and leave without eating, in our culture.
Can you tell me, I'm going to name some foods, and I want you to tell me where from the Middle East they come from.
Oh, that I could get in trouble for that.
You
People
might.
watching this will say, no, this is from this,
I'm trying to stir it up.
Yeah.
So some of my favorite things to eat are Middle Eastern.
Okay.
And I'm going to run some of these by you.
Yeah.
So I am a huge fan of mujadra.
Jadra. Yeah.
Where does mujadra come from?
I think a lot of Middle Eastern countries can claim, ownership of mjadara. I don't think it's like one country. Lebanon is very popular. My wife makes a killer mjadara. My mother as well, my mother-in-law.
Tell your wife next time we do this that she can make dinner if she's making mujadra.
You got it. Mujadra. I'll take note of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Now,
do you like the dark one or the light one? Because
I like the darker one with the real crispy onions and Lebanese salad.
Oh my God. Yes.
I
just got hungry. Honey?
It is so good. Okay. Next one. Kusa.
Kusa. Also, not exclusive to any Arabic country. Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Egypt, Palestine, you name it. Everybody makes it.
So for those people that don't know what kusa is, it is a stuffed squash. It's baked with rice, and it's baked in a broth, usually, in my experience, a tomato broth.
Correct. But there's so many iterations to it and so many varieties for it that depending on which Middle Eastern country you eat it from, you'll be like, this is kusa too, As somebody from the Lebanon, just in the same country, the way my mother made kusa was different than the way my aunt makes kusa.
Really?
And depending on what part of the country you're from.
Is it the difference is the seasonings?
The seasoning, what they stuff in it. Some of it is more rice and other things and vegetables. But you want to talk about healthy? That's why he looks good. He's been eating Lebanese food.
You know what? I'm not eating enough Lebanese food. I need to eat more. Obviously, we all know about tabbouleh. We all know about hummus. Yeah. Or we say hummus. Hummus. Yeah. Okay. Lubia.
Oh my God, he knows his Lebanese food. He knows his Lebanese
food. See, actually, where I was going with this whole thing is everything I'm bringing up from my past life came from the Lebanese woman that I dated.
Really?
And I just wanted to see if he'd take the hook and say, well, Lebanon created all these great foods.
Yeah, I tend to be politically correct about everything because I don't want to offend anybody because everybody can take ownership of these foods. But yeah, they're Lebanese cuisine. I'm biased. Obviously, I'm going to say I'm born and raised in Lebanon. I'm going to say Lebanese food of Middle Eastern dishes to me is the best dish because that's what my palate is used to.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to shock some people. The Middle Eastern culture does a wonderful job with seafood.
Oh, yeah. We're in the Mediterranean. Lebanon's on the Mediterranean.
It's unbelievable, the seafood that they prepare. Delightful.
And that's why the Mediterranean diet, right? Everybody thinks Mediterranean. They usually think along Italy, Greece, Cyprus,
It's the Middle East.
If you come down into Lebanon, the olive oil. Mm-hmm. My grandfather, my father's father, he owned a lot of land in the village where we come from back overseas. Olive trees, fig trees. I mean, I got pictures on my phone when I went back and visited Lebanon when I was a little bit older. When you're young, you don't really pay attention to that stuff. It's a tree. Your grandfather's like, this is a tree that, that is as old as 1,000, this country or long before, and you're looking, all right, Grandpa, I want to go play. But when you're older, you go back. And you see what they have in this land and what's been planted, and they eat from the ground, mm-hmm. and they make their own food. And my grandfather lived till 101 and barely saw a doctor.
Well, it's funny because we've got an issue in America versus the rest of the world. And Americans love bread, right?
Yeah.
And you've got gluten issues and you got all sorts of different crazy things with bread. If you go to the Middle East, you can eat bread all day long. You don't gain weight. You don't get bloated. People who have reactions to various things in bread doesn't exist. Same thing's true in Italy because, as you said, it comes from the earth. It's worked. It's wholesome. It's part of their community. They shop every day versus going once a month and taking boxes off the shelf.
100%.
Or running out to the fast food joints. And, they taste good for a minute, but.
It's astonishing to me. And I put on my physician hat for this when I went down to visit because I'd been here for 20 some years. and I got used to the American diet, but I made sure to always eat Lebanese, cuisine at home as much as I can. But I would say over time, 70 to 80% of my food was non-Lebanese, traditional American food.
Mhm.
And I go and I visit Lebanon and I eat more over there than I do here in my 10 days that I was there. And I lose weight without any exercise over there.
Yep.
And I don't feel as bloated. I don't feel as sick. And I come back as a physician and I'm like, and this was back in 2015. And I'm like, they're killing us here. They're literally killing us. The food industry is killing us slowly, but then they're extending our life with pills.
Yep. Well,
It's
that's
like
why I'm
a
excited
double.
about Kennedy.
Yeah.
I don't agree
Yeah.
with everything Bobby Kennedy says. I'm just going on record.
Yeah.
But I think he's onto something when he talks about what we eat. And I think he's onto something. You tell me, because you're a doctor. I think he's onto something with us having too many vaccinations in America available to people. I think there's a downside to that. I don't know what the downside is, but the questions of, is autism, which seems to be centered in America, a byproduct of our access to all of these drugs or the foods that we're eating? Is that a byproduct potentially? I think that, with COVID, which was an influenza, I got sicker from I had to take, well, I didn't have to. I was leaving the country and for a purpose that I had to leave the country. So I took the Johnson & Johnson shot. Didn't want to. I was sicker from the shot, and I've had COVID 5 times. I was sicker from the shot and still have side effects from the shot than I was from having COVID.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have their reservations about vaccines nowadays, especially after the COVID vaccine debacle and the mandates. As a physician, I've always taken my annual influenza shot. I've given my kids all their shots.
Do you?
I
Interesting.
did. When they were younger, I vaccinated my kids. As physicians, contrary to public knowledge or opinion, we take, depending on your specialty, you take a few courses in immunology and you don't really do a deep dive into vaccinations. You just read the literature, you read that it's safe, effective, etc., and you never question it and you move on with your career. So an orthopedic surgeon is not doing deep dives and research about how the studies were conducted, who funded them, what were the placebo group, what were this. It's published in a reputable journal. It's put out as guidelines by entities and organizations that you respect, and you never really question it. For me, at this point, honestly, if I'm being completely candid about this, and this is one of those things where you can get in hot water and be called an anti-vaxxer, et cetera, et cetera. Well, after the whole COVID experience, I frankly don't care, because everything I talked about came to fruition and was found to be truthful at the end of the day. I was never really anti-vaccine. I was anti-mandate. I didn't feel like anybody who had COVID needed to have 2 shots right afterwards if it was mild to begin with, and let's say they're young and healthy and barely had any issues. I saw that rather quickly in 2021 at the beginning when the vaccines came out, that there was a lot of patients still coming down with COVID after they were vaccinated, when they told us all along for the first 6 months, and the social media videos are out there about Fauci and everybody saying, if you get the vaccine, you're not going to get COVID. And then the narrative changed once all these breakthrough cases happened. So for me, I started to pay more attention now to the vaccine schedule. I'm not going to lie. When I was younger, there wasn't that many shots. Today, there's a lot. And it's worth looking into. I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking questions, because if we stop asking questions, that sets a very bad precedent for everything.
See, that's what bothered me about COVID, the mandates, and then the refusal by people in charge, some of whom were from the medical community, to have the debate. In science, we move forward by challenging the norm, by challenging, people's different positions. And all of a sudden that went away with COVID. And COVID, what a lot of people, as we sit here today, to this day in 2025, a COVID shot doesn't qualify to be called a vaccine under the definition and the operations that we've had in the United States for many, many years.
So that was troubling to me.
It was brought to the market.
Yeah.
The vaccine or poke or whatever you want to call it was never designed to prevent COVID.
Well, they said it was.
They did.
They said
but
it
then
was.
they switched.
Yes,
and
after
admitted and said, really, it was designed to reduce
severity of disease and
the
hospitalization.
symptoms.
Yeah. No, they changed all our lives when you took a vaccine for measles, mumps, rubella. It was a needle in a haystack if anybody came down with measles, mumps, or rubella.
Yep.
When you took polio, you didn't come down with polio.
Yep.
And then so when it came to COVID, initially, and again, the videos are out there and they live eternally on the internet. Everybody from Fauci to the CDC director, I have the video saying if you get the 2 shots, you're not gonna get the virus and you're not gonna transmit it. And once they realized that's not true, after months and months of quote unquote breakthrough cases, the narrative ultimately changed to, we never really said that. We just said it decreases severity of illness. The thing that troubles me the most is at the end of the day, a lot of people have lost faith in public health.
Yep.
And that's very concerning, and that's
it's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to regain the trust of the public when it comes to public health, especially as providers. I don't think there was a lot of, I wouldn't say the vast majority, I would say 99% of the medical community that rubber stamped whatever these public health officials at the time were telling us about COVID and the vaccines and all this stuff. I don't think the majority of providers in the healthcare sector were driven by anything nefarious. I think there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of uncertainty. This was relatively novel. There was a lot of sickness and a lot of deaths that were happening in parts of the country. And I witnessed it myself in the hospital I used to work for. And so when there isn't literature or data or long-term trials, what you rely on is the quote unquote experts in your field that have historically been the people you go to for guidance in a situation like that. It's like relying on your generals when you're a soldier. And so your generals made these decisions and said these remarks. And most people, I wouldn't say us because I took a different line, towed the line, believing wholeheartedly that what is being said and what they're telling the public is the truth and is fact. Yeah. But now fast forward, when things start to unravel and things start to look back, people are looking back at it. Now it's just a matter, do you come out and say, okay, I was wrong? Or do you just ignore it and just move on?
See, I respect the doctors that towed the line. But when you bring up one name,
Fauci,
I get really sour.
Yeah, me too.
Anthony Fauci is a liar.
He is. I believe so wholeheartedly.
The fact from day one, when COVID was exposed to the world, Anthony Fauci started lying in multiple areas, be it gain of function research, be where it came from. The whole time he was making money off of what was going on. It sickens me. Anthony Fauci is a bad man. I can't believe that somehow he qualifies for government immunity, because you talk about someone who damaged our country and the institutions in our country. And Anthony Fauci deserves to be held right up there with some of the biggest losers that America has ever seen.
And I think history will reflect that. I truly believe in our lifetime, history will reflect that, because he put his ego and he put his
Political belief.
political beliefs ahead of. They politicize science, which should never happen. I hope we all learn that we should. I mean, one clear example just about the COVID shots. Throughout 2020, we kept hearing millions of people say, including people at the highest levels of government, that they're apprehensive or will not take the shots because of Donald Trump pushing them fast and twisting the arms of the FDA and Operation Warp Speed and so on and so forth. The moment after the election, within a month, all those people were saying these are the safest, best things to arrive at the market.
Yep.
That should have raised all sorts of eyebrows that medicine has been politicized. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. That should have raised everybody's eyebrows and said, oh my God, they just went from saying they will never take it because Trump is pushing it to now, if you don't take it, you're selfish, you're going to kill everybody in your community, so on and so forth. So that was an eye opener for me as a physician as to what the heck happened to medicine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when it comes to Fauci, he approved one of the things, just one example. I mean, early on, he was telling people, don't wear masks. And then he was based off studies of decades of studies on, the influenza virus. There's plenty of data at that time.
Sure.
And then he does a 180 and it's like, no, everybody needs to wear masks. And then they were recommending cloth masks, which to me was almost like a sitcom. It was like listening to people in the medical arena telling people to wear those gaiters or just put on anything over your face. And you see how the average public handles masks, and I was like, this has got to be a joke. This has to be
virtue posturing.
This has to be a joke that they're talking about, telling people that you do that. And then that's one thing. The other thing was the origin of the virus didn't pass the BS test in my eyes. But you couldn't say that on social media. You get banned because it's like there's a lab over there that does research on coronaviruses from bats, but it just so happened not to be the lab and just down the road, the mark. And I was like, okay. And then the third thing he did, which to me is criminal, is he pushed for emergency use authorization of a drug called remdesivir. That became the standard of care, when at the exact same time, based on very poor studies, when the exact same time, people can go back and look at this, it was not allowed to be used in Europe because they didn't believe it had any benefit and the risks outweighed the benefits. So that to me was like, this is a sad moment in American medicine, that a drug that did not really show any benefit if you really dissect it, which is what we historically did. And I always go back to one of the biggest things that we do as physicians, especially in the academic realm, whether it's for the university here in our state, without naming names, or in Massachusetts or things, you pride yourself as physicians on taking big pharma studies for whatever drugs they want to put out into the market. And you dissect them. You dissect them to see their weaknesses and see if there's biases and so on and so forth. It's almost overnight the medical community as a whole went from being the biggest pushback individual, like we basically the highest critics of medical studies. Overnight we became the defense attorneys of big pharma. You are not allowed to even question remdesivir. You are not even allowed to question whether or not this vaccine should be mandated, let alone, given to 2 and 3 shots and 4 shots to young people who are otherwise very low risk. Overnight, you had to go silent. Otherwise, you're going to be dubbed something that you don't want to be dubbed, an anti-vaxxer, anti-science, anti-this.
Is it true? And I realize that COVID falls into a influenza category.
It's a respiratory virus. Yeah.
Okay. Is it true that the survival rate for people with COVID was higher than people with the flu?
Well, it depends on how you break that down, because infection infection fatality rate versus case fatality rate. There was all sorts of numbers. The amount of people that had COVID per year was much higher than the amount of people that come down with influenza. So if your denominator is much bigger, in general, and you take the number of people that died from COVID, then yeah, it could be true that the number of people that got COVID, especially if you factor in young people and
Did
healthy
they die
people.
from it or with it?
So this is where the debate is, and I understand there's two sides to this debate, and there's different schools of thought, and this may get me into hot water with both schools of thought. I won't claim to know the facts on this 100%, but I believe as a virus, as a respiratory virus, it was novel and it was virulent, meaning it was the original strain that came out of China and then mutated into the first couple of strains and the Delta strain. I had the Delta strain and it was very bad. I needed to be hospitalized. I remember breathing like someone that cannot expand their lung fully, and I developed bilateral pneumonia to the point where I was gasping for air and my oxygen level objectively had dropped into the 70s. So if you already had very little reserve, let's say, as a human being, let's say you have COPD, fibrosis, let's say you have a very weak heart. In general, today, if you get influenza and you have those, you could be in trouble and you could die. You could get a common cold virus, adeno, rhino, even the other coronaviruses, and be in deep water and potentially die. So when people say, did they die from coronavirus as opposed to with it? It's a very subjective almost question, because how do you prove that the virus 100% killed them, and how do you prove that 100% it didn't kill them? Because had they not gotten the virus while they had these underlying conditions, they may be still around. But since they got this virus, it could have pushed them over the edge to death, or their condition just spontaneously at that moment with the virus in their body decided to take them overboard. So it's open.
Now, it's interesting. Everyone has their own personal experience. And my father died during the pandemic.
I'm sorry to hear that.
He was 92 years old. I'm sorry, 95 years old. My mom died at 92. And he died peacefully at home, the way he wanted to die. And I get the death certificate. And cause of death, it says COVID. My dad never had COVID.
Well, that's a mislabel.
And for me,
Yeah.
you talked about red flags that went up. That's why I asked the question of, don't more people die ultimately from influenza as a percentage than from COVID? And I don't believe in the reporting numbers. When I hear that there were financial incentives
There definitely were.
for people to say, this guy's got COVID or this gal's got COVID, right or wrong, there shouldn't be an incentive.
No, and the rationale at the time behind the incentive, now we're going back a little bit, was healthcare systems needed to
Get data.
Not just get data. So for instance, when COVID arrived in March of 2020 in our state, the hospital I used to work at, we needed to discharge anyone and everyone that was not critically ill from our hospital, because we were expecting an avalanche of patients coming in with COVID, and we needed to have the bed capacity. So if you recall, there was a lot of stress about these waves and whether or not hospitals are going to be able to absorb the patients. So by canceling elective surgeries, by canceling so many things that normally hospitals and healthcare systems do that generates revenue for them, they would lose a lot of money in that time period if there wasn't a way to make up for it. And the way the government decided they're going to make up for it is, yes, you're going to see much lower volumes, but we're going to uplift your reimbursement for COVID patients because you're attending to the sickest of the sick, even though your volumes are much lower. So it's just the intention whether you want to believe was in good faith or bad faith or however it was to help healthcare systems remain solvent or not lose a lot of money, millions of dollars of revenue at a time when the country was facing something they never faced. In hindsight, do people abuse it? Just like these stimulus checks and
Absolutely.
Oh my God, I heard something along the lines of billions of dollars are unaccounted for from stimulus dollars during COVID in the state of Michigan alone, right?
Yeah.
So people abuse things, and
Yeah.
then do healthcare systems and other entities abuse things? Possible.
Maybe not pointing the finger, but maybe it's possible. Yeah. Let's go back. So again, I'm curious about your culture. I want to do Lebanese celebrate their faith on Sundays like Catholics do?
Depending if they're Christian or Muslim.
Okay.
If they're Christian, yes, they go to church. I have plenty of my friends, closest friends are Christian. There's multiple churches in the area over here that they go Sunday. They celebrate. If they're Muslim, usually the holy day for Islam is on Fridays. So you'll hear about Friday prayer, noon time. It's an opportunity for people to go to the mosque, do their prayer, and listen to a lecture by one of the clergy.
How do people react if someone like me walks into a mosque on a Friday? And I wouldn't know what to do, by the way. So I don't know what the protocol would be.
So unless you walk up to somebody and tell them, can you help me pray this? They'll just look at you like anyone else and
say, thinking, what are you doing here?
Or or the ones that like to go into the rabbit holes, because every community has one, right? We'll look at you as possibly FBI, CIA, NSA. Entrapment, something is happening here. Be careful, And in all seriousness, it all depends on the individual. But if you walked into a mosque, they would think, my God, this gentleman probably is either interested in converting to the religion or wants to learn more about the religion, or is actually a Muslim, because...
So it'd be okay.
Yeah, of course. There's no... It's like me walking into a church.
Yeah, I asked because I don't know.
We got to take you, have food in Dearborn and go to a mosque. I think these experiences, Kevin, would break a lot of the things that have been shaped in your mind based off the same things that were shaped in my mind when I moved out to Northville. I was afraid I was going to be looked at because of so many people told me, you're going to be living amongst white people primarily and no ethnic people. There's no diversity in the time that I came out of Northville.
Well, your perception's your reality.
Exactly. When I got out there, I was like, I hope, like people don't come out and like burn my tree or something, Like that's the stuff that they put in your mind and you don't know any better until you're there. And then after a year or so, I was like, I'm so angry. I'm like so angry at all the people that said stupid stuff about white people, Like, because just like you, if you're sitting with me, talking to me and you're like, what's different about this guy than my neighbor in Bloomfield Hills right now? They've warped all our minds, honestly.
They really have. And, I talked earlier that we have lost curiosity. And curiosity is such an integral part of learning. And I think it's normal for people to want to be around people like themselves.
Absolutely.
Now, that doesn't mean you're racist.
100% no.
It's just maybe more comfortable.
100%.
And yet, it's no different than reading a book that, if you're like history and you read a murder mystery, all of a sudden you've expanded your mind.
100%.
And I think that we need to be more curious in Michigan. We need to learn. And I hope the people that listen to this, I hope the people that watch this can sense, for me, this is a genuinely rewarding night. You and I have spoken twice prior to this, and I feel like I am your friend. I feel like our families would interact. I really want to taste your wife's mujadra.
100%. That's
You know,
say no more.
and and I'm being sincere. I'm not bullshitting anybody about it. It's literally.
You guys have gone beyond the echo.
We've gone beyond the echo, and when you do that, it's a pretty positive thing. Yeah. Thank you, Sam, for your time tonight. We're going to do some more of this, and we may grab Tony and his team, which will probably really freak people out if you and I walk into a place and we've got camera crews behind us. And
I think that will be a great eye-opening experience, because I really think that's the strength of America. I know we're going through a tough time right now and have been, but I really believe as long as people have the foundation of what America stands for ingrained in their hearts and their minds, the diversity that sometimes people are afraid of is our strength. Imagine how boring America would be if it was all Applebee's restaurants everywhere
Right.
and nothing else, right? So we all share a common theme, and that's what we need to get people to understand. Whether your grandparents came from Germany 10 generations ago or they came from Lebanon just 20 years ago, as long as you believe in the American ideals, we are all the same at the end of the day. We want to get to the
Absolutely.
same place. We want to do the same things. We love our country. We want it to be prosperous and strong and safe. We want to instill the same values in our children so that the next 50 generations enjoy the same things we were able to enjoy. We don't want to see it decline. We wanted to see it the most powerful nation on earth. We want to do all the same things, but as long as we're not talking to each other, that can never happen.
yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to two things. One, in 2025, I truly believe that we will have peace back in the Middle East.
I hope so. I mean, for the sake of everybody.
For
I
the
really
sake
hope
of
so.
everybody.
Yeah.
And that transcends to every country in the world. We need to have peace. And I'm looking forward to expanding our relationship.
Me too.
Should be fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Been a pleasure.
So if people want to reach out to you, Sam, how can they get a hold of you?
They can call Mark Zuckerberg and tell him to uncensor my Facebook page.
Well, Elon Musk the other day, we're going to see how long it takes for the
Yeah.
fact checkers to
Yeah.
go away and
Yeah.
for free speech to come
Yeah.
back to Facebook.
I hope so. He said, I saw a video, but yeah, I am on Facebook. That's really where I got my notoriety, was from Facebook under Sam Fawaz. You have to really look for it because they bury it deep down if you're not a follower. But yeah, no, I'm on Facebook. That's how I got to know Garrett. That's how I got to know so many wonderful people in the Republican Party and across Metro Detroit, Michigan, and then Florida and across the country. I have followers from everywhere. I'm really humbled by, and I've met so many people. I've met so many friends through Facebook. I've gotten so many patients through Facebook because of my mindset and so on and so forth. So anyone that wants to know what I'm thinking, how I feel about something, what I'm doing, what my plans are, I'll be on Facebook.
Yeah, your influence in the Middle Eastern community is significant. And
We're trying.
everything that I've heard tonight, God, I applaud it. I think it's great. And I think that more people need to meet you and know you and understand what's in your heart. And that's good stuff.
We all want the same things at the end of the day, Kevin.
Sam, I got a question for you. The portrayal of Donald Trump is that he is anti-immigrant, that he is anti-Muslim, that he has prejudices against Middle Eastern people. And yet, within your community, his popularity grew in this last election. And I happen to believe that the Arab American community, the Middle Eastern community, delivered Michigan to Donald Trump. How do you balance what the press says about this man and explain the growing acceptance within your community?
I think back in 2016 and 2020, a lot of people had the wrong impression about Donald Trump because of two things. One, because of the way he carries himself sometimes, the way he speaks. Sometimes it's abrasive, not well thought out, so on and so forth. And two, the way the media portrayed him, always taking everything he says and exaggerating it or twisting it. And people don't do their homework most of the time. Most people are not political junkies. I think after the Biden administration and their performance, and you got to recall the Middle Eastern community overwhelmingly supported Biden in 2020 because they did not like Trump. But after the last 4 years, as Americans, not just as Middle Easterners, as Americans, seeing what happened to their country, seeing the cost of living go up, seeing the chaos, seeing what's happening in the world overseas, so on and so forth, there was an awakening that happened. Now, how did some of that awakening come towards Donald Trump? Well, Donald Trump's personality has not changed. He's still the same person. He still speaks in the same way. But there's something that Donald Trump does that no major American politician in both parties has done in recent history, which is he's not afraid to go talk to people and go places. He's not. He doesn't subscribe to the stereotypes. And this is the way that I always explain it to people when they ask me, how do you support Donald Trump, given the way he talks and so on and so forth? And I'm like, well, I'm not looking for the man to fall in love with the man. I'm looking at the policies, because the last 4 years should have proven to you policies are more important than personalities.
My mom used to say, actions speak louder than words.
Correct.
You've heard the phrase.
So number two, he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He doesn't care to be politically correct, which resonates with people of Middle Eastern heritage. We're blunt. Say it to our face. You don't like us? Say it to our face. You like us? Say it to our face. Don't tiptoe around what you really think of us. Number three, and he proved that in his first term, he went and he met with the president of North Korea, or the leader of North Korea, when everybody thought we're going to go to war with North Korea. When he found out there are people in Michigan, in the Middle Eastern community, that are willing to host him, a true Islamophobe or xenophobe or anti-immigrant person would say, you know what? He'd consult with his consultants and they'd say, no, we don't want to interact with it. The optics of it, it may lose us votes in certain demographics. But that's what's beautiful about Donald Trump, to say the least, is he doesn't care what anybody else thinks. People thought, oh my God, this may lose him votes with this group versus that group. No. The way I look at Donald Trump and the way that I have him structured in my mind at this point is very simple. This is what I share with friends and family of the Middle Eastern community. If you look at this man and you understand all he cares about is the love of America, and America is the most important thing to him, and as an American, he will do everything in his power to keep you safe, secure, and prosperous, regardless of your ethnic background, regardless of your religion, regardless of your race, your sexual orientation, so on and so forth. As long as you're an American, in his eyes, he is your president and he will go to bat for you. If you convince yourself of that, everything about President Donald Trump starts to make sense.
I agree. You know, it's so interesting. We've got in America different segments of the community that says, if I don't get my way, you're bad. That doesn't mean if you don't get your way that person doesn't support you. I had a picture sent to me, and this is scary. I live in Bloomfield, and a friend sent me a picture from Somerset Mall, which is a big shopping area. And some guy was walking his person who thought they were a cat or a dog through the mall on a leash.
Yeah.
And I don't think Donald Trump loves that person less. but I don't think Donald Trump's going to call him a cat or a dog either.
Yeah.
You know, and to your point, I think that it all starts to make sense.
People got to get back to remembering, and this is the thing that separates America and Americans from a lot of countries across the world. Just because you disagree with your fellow American does not make them your enemy.
Right.
Overseas, people disagree. They kill each other. They blow each other up. They imprison each other. We got to get back to civility and understanding that you may not love Donald Trump. You may not agree with his policies, just like I didn't with most of Joe Biden's policies in the last 4 years, but he was not my enemy.
Yeah.
And once we get back to that, I think we'll be in better shape.
Yep. Again, you know, it's that curiosity. It's the ability to converse, and it's a desire to learn and understand. I hope everybody enjoyed Dr. Sam Fawaz tonight. I know that I personally learned a lot about our Middle Eastern neighbors and their beliefs and their values. And I'm anxious to see them taking a greater role in Michigan and in our country as we move forward in 2025 and beyond. So this is the essence of Beyond the Echo. These are the types of things that I want to talk about. And Sam, thank you. It's I give you credit. You are courageous because even within the Middle Eastern community, you face pushback simply because you're Lebanese. And that may not mesh with another group. We got to get past that for all of our benefits, and it takes leaders like yourself. So thank you. And I would encourage some of our friends on the other side of the aisle to maybe have the courage that Sam does to come and sit down and talk on Beyond the Echo about the issues that are important for the people of Michigan and the issues that are important for America. Because at the end of the day, we'll probably agree on a whole lot more than we disagree on. So look forward to the next episode. Thanks very much. Have a great night. Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Echo. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop us a comment and share the podcast with your friends. Stay connected and keep the conversation going by following us on social media. Until next time, keep exploring Beyond the Echo.